2005. And I'm the interviewer, Shayna Fitzpatrick, and Lynanne Bell is doing the camera. We are interviewing Glenn Marks, who was born on July 27th, 1925. And he lives at 10268 Foreman in Ada, Michigan. Now, where were you during the war, and what type of work did you perform?
I was in the medical department, and I was over in Germany during the war.
Okay. And were you drafted, or did you enlist?
Well, I tried to enlist when I was a senior in high school. I took an examination and passed for Navy officer training program. And I went to Indianapolis to get my physical, and the guy looked at me and he said, "You're too short. you can't pass you for this job." So then I was drafted.
Okay. And where were you living at the time?
In Michigan, down in Cass County, southern part of Michigan, out in the country. We're just a country boy. We didn't have any electricity or just a great place to live.
So what time was it roughly when you got drafted? When did you leave?
Well, I got drafted. Well, I had registered. I was 18 in July, and then I started to Bible school in September. But since I had already registered, even though I was preparing for the ministry, they went ahead and drafted me, and I went in January 11th. It's when I went into service.
Okay. Where did you go for your boot camp?
Camp Grant, Illinois, out over by Rockford, and it was quite a large Army camp there.
Do you remember your instructors?
I remember my sergeant and corporal, Sergeant Bernardi, a real deep voice, and Corporal Matherly, and they were the ones that shaped us into soldiers from civilians. I remember those two. I don't really remember anybody else particularly.
And what was your experience in boot camp like?
It was quite a shock. First thing you came in, you got a butch haircut. You just zipped off, and I remember particularly scrubbing floors. Every Saturday night they called it GI the floors, and so we all lined up in the barracks there, and a bucket of water and a scrub brush and a bar of soap, and you just had to scrub the floor. And we put a lot of bleach in it so the floors were white, and then every day you had to make your bed, and it had to be tight enough that the sergeant would flip a quarter on it. If it bounced, why, it was okay. If it didn't bounce, why, it wasn't tight enough.
Wow. So
one other thing I remember particularly about boot camp, I attended school. I could type, and so I was assigned to clerk typist school. And so I had 8 weeks of schooling. I had maybe a few weeks of basic, and then I had 8 weeks of school. And the next day after I came back from school, we went on a 15-mile forced march, and I thought I was going to die. My legs hurt so bad, but I was too proud. I wouldn't fall out. And so I made the 15-mile forced march, but that was probably the hardest day in my whole life.
Did you think that boot camp prepared you for the military?
Yeah, pretty well. You know, it seemed to be what I needed.
So what war did you serve in?
Well, it was World War II. Yeah, it was in 1944 that I went in. And so actually I got out of basic training on D-Day. It was the invasion of on D-Day. I was on the train headed east, going that way.
What branch of the Army were you in?
I was in a medical department.
In the Army?
Yeah, in the Army, yeah.
So what exactly was your job assignment?
Well, I was trained as a clerk typist, but it was later on in the war, and clerk typists didn't get killed as often as other people, and so they didn't need any replacements. And so I was assigned to a frontline medical unit.
Okay. So tell me about your experiences.
Well, my first day in combat was the day after Thanksgiving. I was assigned to this unit, and then we went up. Our particular job, there were four of us in a unit that had four people in a jeep, and our job was to help evacuate the wounded. Whatever group, division, regiment from the First Army was expecting extra casualties, we went with them, and our particular job was to get them back to the field hospital as soon as possible. And so we were, this was our particular job that we were assigned to do. You want me to tell a couple experiences?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we were with with an Army unit that the first troops that went into Germany was near Aachen, Germany. We went through the Siegfried Line. It was the day after Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving Day, we had a nice Thanksgiving dinner, and then the next morning we got up early and went through the Siegfried Line. There were large concrete boxes that they had built, two in front and one behind, and this one behind was to protect the two in front. But what they had done was during the night they had gone up and put dynamite on top of these pillboxes. And so when the troops got ready to go through, they detonated this dynamite, and the concussion took care of anybody that was inside. They were either killed or completely disoriented. And so we went through into Germany with no casualties. I did see my first dead German, and that really hit me hard. Because it was this young fella out there dead, and they had gone through his pockets, and here were pictures of a wife and I think three little kids, and right away I got the real fact of what war is all about. And well, then I was in the Battle of the Bulge. We were in Germany here, and actually our guys, we were up with a different unit, and we were in this large German castle. And the Germans began assembling right in the yard of this castle, and this more and more kept piling in, and we knew something was going to happen, but we had no idea of what it was, what was going to happen. And then what was termed the Battle of the Bulge, the Germans, instead of coming right straight ahead at us, went down about 5 miles and went through the line there, and then advanced, trying to get through to our gasoline supplies. We had a large gasoline dump, and they were running very, very low on fuel. And they had, the Germans had tricked some American soldiers. I had the privilege of going over for the 50th anniversary celebrations in France, and one of the men that I went over with was in an artillery unit, and his unit had seen a farmhouse there with smoke coming out, and they went to investigate. And when they talked to the man that was there, he seemed like such a friendly man, and gotten acquainted. And he said, "You come back on this day, and I'll give you wine for your Christmas party." And so Jim, and I knew him personally from Goshen, Indiana. Jim was in the Jeep with a whole bunch of other guys. There were 3 or 4 vehicles, and they were going to this farmhouse to get wine for their Christmas party. And Jim was in the Jeep, but before they left, probably it's a truck. It was in the truck. But before they left, the officer in charge said, "Jim, I don't want you to go." And Jim got out of the truck, and the other guys went. And then the Germans tricked them and ambushed them and killed the whole bunch of them, took their uniforms and their trucks, and then they used the trucks to mess things up, trying to make it easier for the advance that were trying to get back to this ammunition dump. And so since we weren't in combat with them there, then we went back to an evacuation hospital and spent the entire time during the Battle of the Bulge helping care for the wounded, carrying them in and out of the hospital, out of the operating unit. And so I was involved in that. And then probably the most intense combat was when the dam on the Roar River was captured. The Germans had controlled the dam and had high ground on the other side, and the Americans, First Army, and the British and the Canadians were downriver, ready to cross the Roar, but they didn't dare cross because they were afraid that the Germans would blow the dam and flood them out. So they had sent in a armored unit trying to take the dam, and they pulled them out, and then they sent in a paratroop unit to trying to take the dam, and they pulled them out, and then they sent in an infantry division to take the dam regardless of casualties. And so we were sent to help evacuate the casualties. Well, it was quite an experience. Going down into this town, this little town, we got to the top of the hill and got in what was called a weasel. It was like a Jeep when it was tracked. It was a real light vehicle. And we got in this weasel, and the driver said, "Now get down because we're going to go fast." And so he went down the hill zigzagging, and the shells started flying all around us. But the good Lord was with us, and nothing, we didn't get hit. And so we got down into this little town and pulled up where there were some other infantry people here. And right when we stopped, a shell hit and landed and hit the man, which was about 15 feet from me. He got shrapnel from this shell. Well, then that night we slept in a house. We didn't know what was going to happen or when, but we slept in the house and had a good night's rest comparatively. But we woke up early. We left at daybreak. We got out of the house, and we came back after this, about an hour after we had left, and we got back to this house, and there'd been a direct shell hit, and the house was completely demolished. Just if we wouldn't have been out of it, then no way we could have survived. And then that night, they captured the dam. The infantry went in and captured the dam, and we got a call to come down and pick up casualties. So we started down that way, and we got to this road that went down to the dam, and the driver stopped, the Jeep driver stopped, and he said, that road has not been cleared of mines, and I'm not going to go down there. And so we sat there for a while, and I argued. I said, guys, we got to go. And he said, I'm not going. And probably after about 10 minutes or so, I said, well, I'm going to go down. It's our job, and I'm going to go down. I said, I'll walk ahead of the Jeep. And so I walked ahead of the Jeep, and then the driver and the other guys followed. And so then we got down, and we picked up a couple of wounded fellas and took them out. And the interesting thing about this was that when I got home, I had written a particular letter that was different from the other, just trying to get a little location with some code that I had figured out. And I got home, and my sister said, when you wrote that particular letter, were you in any special danger? And I thought, and I said, yeah, that's when things were really the roughest time that I was in. And my sister said, well, your father had a special burden of prayer for you, and for several days went upstairs and just especially prayed for you. And I said, well, that's the reason I'm still alive, is my father's prayer. And so that was very important to me. Well, then we were with the first troops that crossed the bridge at Remagen across the Rhine. The Germans were retreating and blowing up the bridges across the Rhine, but this one bridge didn't get blown up. And so the First Army units started to cross. Then within a half hour, we were with them, and then we drove clear into central Germany, about 100 miles from Berlin, and we were at the German airfield at Halle, and so then we stayed there and waited for the Russians to take Berlin, and so that's where I was when the war ended.
So what did you do after the war?
After the war, well, I was, we went by points, and I don't know exactly how they figured it, but according to combat and time of service, and I had low points, and so the guys that had been there longer, they started sending them home, but I was kept in to take care of wounded German soldiers. We supervised the German hospitals that were taking care of them. So I stayed there after the war for close to a year until we got the wounded men sent back home, and then I got to go home.
Did you like your job while you were there?
Well, it was just, it was my duty. I had the privilege of serving my country. You don't like war. There's nothing about war that you really like, except the fact that our country was in tremendous danger from Hitler and Mussolini and Tito from Japan. And if the American soldiers wouldn't have stepped up to the plate and really did a job. And it's almost unbelievable how dedicated our men were. How well duty called me to walk ahead of that Jeep. I had to do it. I just couldn't. I couldn't think I could live with myself if I hadn't done my job. And so and that was the attitude. It's just unexplainable. Sure, we had discipline and all of that, but there was the willingness. The guys hung in there. The guys just absolutely were compelled to do this job and protect our country.
Did you get awarded any medals?
Yeah. Well, I got the 3 battle stars here. This is the European theater, and this was Ardennes. What was Belgium, Ardennes, and then Central Europe. And then this was the Meritorious Unit Award, and then this was the Good Conduct Medal. So I got those 3.
Right. So how did you stay in touch with your family?
I wrote letters. I was very faithful in writing home, and my parents, especially mother, my sister, wrote letters, sent some goodie boxes, and so I kept in touch with them that way.
While you were there, what was the food like?
The food was good. Of course, I had been to college and had learned a little bit about institutional food, and it's not like mom's cooking. But the food was good. Like on Thanksgiving Day, when we were right up at the front, we had a good Thanksgiving dinner with turkey and all the dressings, and I enjoyed the food. Put on some weight, and no complaints about the food.
So where did you mostly stay at? Like sleeping arrangements?
Well, mostly in tents. Well, we had barracks at the basic, at the regular 2-floor barracks, bunk beds, and then when I was in England for a couple of weeks, about 4 or 5 weeks, and we had tents with bunks there. And then when we were over in from up to being assigned to the unit, we slept in pup tent, 2-man pup tent. We each of us had 2 blankets and a half a tent, and so 2 of us would go together and make our tent. And I remember one particular time in Belgium there that we were in a place just out in the wilderness, and we cut branches off of the spruce trees and made ourselves a nice comfortable bed and put 2 blankets down underneath it. And then they had 2 blankets to cover up. And it was coming on winter, but yet we were real comfortable. We just made do. And then after the war, then we stayed in a home, in a house in Germany, and had things fixed up quite comfortably.
Okay. Did you feel as though you had enough supplies while you were there?
Yeah. It was really amazing how well they were able to supply. During the Battle of the Bulge was the tightest time, but then we still had adequate. Somehow they got them in. The supply system was really, really great.
Did you feel stressed or pressured, or do you remember any kinds of feelings while you were there?
Of course, I guess I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky person. Um, and I had a good relationship with the Lord Jesus, and no, I can't really say that I was stressed out at any time. I just kind of went along with things.
Was there anything you would do for good luck?
No, I wasn't superstitious, and I did a lot of praying. So that was my good luck charm, and I had my little New Testament with me, and I read my Bible.
So, how did you spend most of your free time?
Well, I was curious, and so when I could, I would get out and walk. Particularly in England, I spent about 4 or 5 weeks in England, and whenever we'd have free time, another young fellow and I, we'd go out and walk and explore things. Um, some days we'd walk as much as 20, 25 miles, just exploring the country, and so just whatever there was to do, why we did it, and made the best of it.
What did you do on leave?
Well, one time particularly, after the war, when I was over there, the first sergeant and I got a pass to Switzerland. And so we had a 7-day pass, and so we got to go to Switzerland. And I remember one incident particularly. We tried to order apple pie a la mode with apple pie with ice cream on top of it. And we just had the hardest time making the gal understand that this is what we wanted. But we finally got the message through to her, and we had apple pie a la mode. And we got to go skiing, took the train, sightseeing, skiing. I fell down and hurt my leg, not seriously, but I had a sore leg while I was going. But of course, here in the States, every leave I got, I was able to go home. And so of course, back then you could take the train. The trains were running, and just hop on the train, and for most any place you could get a train. And I was in Pennsylvania and got a leave, and so I got on the train and went home, and I went home as much as I could, and just. Again, just whatever there was to do, I seemed to do it.
Do you recall any humorous events or any unusual things that happened over there?
Oh boy, humorous events. No, I don't have any particular. I don't think of anything particularly that would be in that category, I guess.
Mm-hmm. How did you think of your fellow soldiers and officers?
Well, they were great for the most part. Of course, the first thing you learned in the Army was respect. Whatever they say, you accept it and don't question. If you question, you start getting into trouble. And so you very quickly learn to obey orders, which is discipline is absolutely essential in the armed services. And for the most part, very, very good. One officer, little question in some areas, but the second lieutenants were the ones that were the funniest. They just got out of officers training school. It was they were learning, and but you just put up with it. And,
What were they like?
oh, some of them just had just gotten their bars, their one bar, their second lieutenant bar, and they were trying to show their authority, and some of them had a little problem, but I'm sure they learned, just like all of us. No matter what you do, you have to have some time learning to do it.
Did you keep a diary?
No, I didn't. I wrote a lot of letters home, but I don't think those letters got kept. So no, I didn't really keep a diary.
So you were private?
I went in as a private, and then I was a PFC, private first class, during my service in the, in combat. I was a PFC, and then I got my first. My PFC is one stripe, and then two stripes is I was a technician, 5th grade, and then I got a promotion to technician 4th grade, and then technician 3rd grade. Then after the war, and that was over.
Do you remember the day that your service ended?
Yeah. Well, I remember the last, probably the last month. Remember it very clearly, the trip back in the boat. Very, very stormy. It was a relatively small, one of the victory ships they called them, a relatively small ship, and it was in February, March, and it was tremendously rough coming back over the Atlantic, but I never got seasick, even though I had been in a lot of rough waters. And when I went to France, we were from England. We were a small ship, and it was so rough that we couldn't unload for 3 days. We just laid out there in the English Channel and tossed and so forth, but I didn't get seasick. Well, I didn't get seasick on the way home. I almost got seasick one morning. But we got, but you collect a lot of stuff, and I had my duffel bag just really full of junk, and when you have to carry it a while, it gets pretty heavy, so you start throwing stuff away. But then I went to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, and I don't know if the last day particularly stands out, but I remember that whole experience and how excited I was about getting out of this place and being able to go home.
So what did you do when you got home?
When I got home, I loafed a little bit, signed up for unemployment, and I think after about a month, 6 weeks, something like that, I got tired of loafing, and I started to work. I worked with my father, who was a builder, and so then and then in that fall, I got out in March, and so then I worked all summer, and then that fall I went back to Bible school and started back to school. I remember one instance, my first semester there at school. I was in the library, and someone dropped a book on the table and made a big loud noise and big bang, and just automatically, before I was happening. I was down at the table, just just a reaction of what to do when there's shooting. You duck. You get down as low as possible, and I got down under the table. Early that semester, I was attracted to a young lady from Ohio, and was born in California, but she was living in Ohio at that time. And so I began to get kind of interested in her. So then I transferred. I went first year to Fort Wayne, and then I transferred to our church school in Mishawaka, Indiana. And school, I had a GI Bill, which was very helpful. They paid tuition and a little towards our others. They pretty well covered the expenses of college. And I worked during the summer. Well, then my brother and I started working for my uncle, pouring concrete. He was a concrete man, and we did that. Well, then about sophomore year in college, my brother and I started our own business, and it really, really went well. And of course, I was tempted to, skip school and go into business, but I felt I should be in the ministry, and so I kept on in school. But our business was good enough that every day I would work, I could make $100.
Wow.
$100 a day, and so the business did well. And actually, my senior year of college, I made more than the college president in our business. Well, when I got near being out of school, I got kind of looking at the money and tempted to stay in the business rather than going on into the ministry. And I just made this suggestion to this young lady that by that time had promised to be my wife, and just said, well, maybe we ought to stay in the business rather than going into the ministry. And she said, I promised to marry a preacher. If you want to be a building contractor, you go ahead, but don't count on me going with you. So anyway, we got married, and when I graduated, after I graduated, and she had graduated also with a 2-year Bible course, and so we went into the ministry, turned the business over to my brother, and we got involved in starting new churches. And so we took a church at Plymouth, Indiana, $25 a week, and they rented us a house, which was an old schoolhouse with no bathroom, no indoor plumbing. So we had 6 rooms and a bath, and but we had a great time. We just enjoyed thoroughly this church. And so we started that church, got that one going, and then we went to South Bend and started another one. And then we went to North Manchester, Indiana, and started another church. And then we went to Indianapolis and started another church. And then we moved up here and started a church here at Lowell. But it was kind of interesting, this business that I turned over to my brother. He cleared in the business $10,000 in 6 weeks' time. And $10,000 was equivalent to a new car, and I had built our first home, and material and the land, no labor, but the material and the land for that house cost $8,000, a three-bedroom house. So 6 weeks' time, the business had paid for a car and a home, and we gave it up, but never regretted it. The Lord's been so good to us. We've enjoyed the ministry. We have a great family, 4 children, and they're all happily married, and we have 14 grandchildren, and we had 55 years together as husband and wife, and so we're just really happy. Yeah.
Did you make any close friendships while you're in the service?
You know, I didn't really. I wasn't with these 3 guys in our, we're just a matter of months, and we weren't close enough to any large group, so we didn't have any division reunions or anything. I didn't really keep up relationship with any of the people in service.
Did you join a veterans organization?
Yeah, just a couple of years ago, I joined the VFW, the Veterans of War and War, here in Lowell. I had always kind of thought, well, there's a little too much drinking and so forth goes on there, and I wasn't interested. But then when they got the new building here, no smoking, no bar in the building, and I said, well, it's time for me. I'm gonna join the VFW, so I'm a member of the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars.
Good. Do you feel that your military experience influences your thinking about war and military in general?
Yes. Actually, I became more accepting of the necessity of military. I don't like it. None of us like it. And I grew up in a very conservative area. In fact, I did go in asking for non-combatant service. I never carried a gun in the Army. But it's one of those things that we don't like, but that has to be done. And our country wouldn't have made it without, I think back of the Revolutionary War and how these guys, they just hung in there. That's the thing. You just hang in there, and the good Lord helped us to maintain our freedom in spite of all of the conflicts, all of the enemies so. Yeah, it's made me feel stronger about the necessity of even though I don't like it.
Okay. You mentioned that you were in your organization. What kind of stuff do you do in there?
In the VFW?
Yeah.
Oh, we have monthly meetings. I don't make it all, but help take care of veterans that need help, other veterans and families, and charitable things. And then we just put on the Memorial Day parade here a few days ago, and I, for the first time, marched with the veterans in the Memorial Day parade. I had bad knees and didn't try it, but I had both knees replaced, and I thought up to walking, so I marched with the veterans here at the Memorial Day parade.
How was that like?
Well, it was great. Yeah, it was great. It was nice to march down through town and then out at the cemetery, did the honoring the dead, thinking back of those that had so faithfully served our country, and well, really millions that gave their life that we could have our freedom. And, thinking if things had been just a little bit different, I would have been one of those that my life was taken, but the good Lord was with me, and I made it through. So I'm just exceedingly thankful that I'm still alive.
How does your service and your experiences affect your life?
Well, I don't know as it had too big an effect on me. I learned some discipline. It didn't have, I don't think it had any negative effect on me. I guess I just looked at it as here's a block of time in my life when I did what I had to do, and life goes on. Yeah, I had a little time. I had kind of a rough time in my first semester in college. Fact is, I even flunked a couple of courses. I just had real difficulty concentrating. But I got a hold of myself, and I said, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to make it. And I ended up through college with a B average. So it's discipline. It's just we got to do it, so we do it. That's partly what I learned, and I had been taught that at home. We're a very disciplined family, and I worked with my grandfather and father in the carpenter work, and so I had a good foundation of discipline, but the Army probably helped enforce it.
How did your experience of going to the 50th anniversary of D-Day help?
It helped. It helped greatly. I had not really been able to talk much about my experiences. Once in a while I'd mention it in one of my sermons if it emphasized a point. But when I got over there, during the D-Day celebrations, we were there in the tent, and I just bawled like a baby. I lost it. I completely lost it. I just let loose. And then we went out and looked at the cemetery, and all of those crosses, all those men that had given their life, just really, and then I especially thought of my best friend in high school, Paul Fuller. He was president of the class, and I was vice president of our senior class. And Paul was in the service, and Paul, and I don't know all the details, but their unit was pinned down with machine gun fire. And Paul probably was lead man of the day. And Paul stood up and blew machine gun fire so that the machine gunners could be located and taken out so that the unit could advance. And then Paul died a few days later. And just all of these things just come crushing in on me, and I just kind of let loose of everything. And before that, I wouldn't have been able to talk like I'm talking now. But that helped loosen things up, and we got to stay in a French home while we were over there. There were a group of us from our church. We had missionaries in that right by the area where the invasion was, and so they rented two Ford vans for our group and kept us in their homes, and we ate together and ate with the French people, and just it just it just was a great time. I was really glad I got to go.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I've probably rambled enough. Just appreciate you girls, and appreciate you've been very, very friendly and very smiley, and just a nice time together.
Thank you for the interview.
It's my privilege.
The following oral military history project is a series of documentaries in association with the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.